All right, guys, today we're going to cover Unit 1, Basic Concepts, Topic 1.3, which is Comparative Advantage and Gains from Trade. So what we're going to cover in this video is we're going to cover Absolute Advantage, Comparative Advantage, and then terms of trade. All right? So first thing we want to look at is specialization in trade. So why do certain countries, right, or why do people want to trade with each other? So think about that for a second. Think, why do people trade? Now, let's just assume that people didn't trade. What things would you have gone without today? What would you have not had if you didn't trade with anybody? And then think of your environment that you live in that you would have probably gone without trade. So I live in El Paso, right? And that's a desert environment, right? So if I didn't trade with something, right, or if I didn't trade with someone, then I probably wouldn't have gone. I would have gone without my orange juice that I had this morning. I would have gone without the bananas that come from a tropic environment. I would have probably gone with a lot of the things that I did not produce myself, right? So if I didn't trade with someone, and then I would go without everything that I didn't make myself, right? So, and then I'm limited too in the fact that I live in a desert environment. So that also kind of makes it a little bit difficult when I'm not trading with other people. So, what do you think cities would look like if they couldn't trade with other cities, or people in states that couldn't trade with other people in other states? Well, think about this, right, is that we have NAFTA, and so if you want a Mexican product, right, we have that trade agreement with Mexico. So now it's easier to get Mexican products here in the United States, right? For example, in another video I talked about avocados, right? Now the consumption of avocados have gone up because of NAFTA, right? And so think of other things that are Mexican products that we've grown to love, right? Like Takis and things like that that were produced in Mexico and now are traded to the United States. So if we didn't trade with other countries and we didn't trade with other states and we didn't trade with other people, then that would reduce our choices and make us worse off, right? Like we have a better life, right? We have a better standard of living now because of being able to trade with other people, right? Think of how rich your breakfast was with having orange juice and maybe cereal and maybe, I have this oatmeal in the morning that has pineapples, it has dragon fruit, it has papaya in it, right? And those are all fruits that come from different parts of the world, right? Pineapple probably from Hawaii, pineapple or papaya from Mexico, and I'm not really sure where dragon fruit comes from, or whatever. It probably doesn't come from. I mean, it maybe comes from Hawaii or whatever, but that's certainly not grown here locally in El Paso, right? So it made my breakfast significantly better. It made my oatmeal significantly better, which probably the oats probably were somewhere in the Midwest, and then the almond milk is probably some almond, also some almond farm out in the Midwest or wherever almonds are grown, locally grown. So, but the point is that I'm trying to make is that my breakfast was way richer and way better than, let's say, eggs that I could have, if I had chickens here in El Paso that I could have had, right? So that is why, that's why trade is so important. It increases and makes our standard of living much richer, right? Now, if we're looking at the next topic, which is absolute and comparative advantage, right? And that's going to look at trade, right? Now, the first thing that we want to look at when we're looking at comparative and absolute advantage, we want to see the per unit opportunity cost. Now, what is per unit opportunity cost? Well, per unit opportunity cost is going to be your opportunity cost equals the cost over the gain, right? So let's write that out real quick for you guys. That's going to be units So your per unit opportunity cost is when you cost over your gain. So what you had to pay for it and what you got out of it, right? So if we're going to look at, assume it costs you $50 to produce 5 T-shirts, right? So what is your per unit opportunity, or what's your per unit cost for each shirt, right? So let's see, we're going to put, it cost us $50, right, for the shirts, and we gained 5 shirts out of that, right? So our per unit opportunity cost is going to be 10, yes? Okay, and that should make sense to us. Now, the next one, if let's take money out of the equation, because money makes it kind of a little simple to understand. But for this, for what we're going to be using, maybe money, we're going to take money out because we don't really use money with comparative advantage. So let's look at what is our per unit opportunity cost. If we were looking at shirts, producing 5 shirts, and you could have had 10 hats, right? So so again, we're going to take money out, and instead we're looking at producing 5 T-shirts. So we're going to gain 5 T-shirts, but we could have had 10 hats. So it cost us 10 hats to produce the 5 T-shirts. Well, 1 T-shirt is going to cost us 2 hats, right? Because again, you'd put the 5 T-shirts, right? Write this a little bit better. 5 T-shirts, and then 10 hats, right? So the 10 hats, it cost us 10 hats, right, to produce 5 T-shirts. So 1 hat, or 1 T-shirt essentially costs us 2 hats, right? And then what is the per unit opportunity cost for hats in terms of shirts given up? So if we're to flip it, right, now we're doing hats, it would be 10 hats in the denominator, right? And 5 shirts in the numerator. Then one hat costs half of a shirt, right? And we can see that there. All right, so that's our per unit opportunity cost. Now, I mentioned earlier there's 2 types of advantages, right? There's absolute advantage and there's comparative advantage. Now, I'm going to go through an example of how to do comparative advantage using Ronald McDonald and Papa John's, okay? And so let me go ahead and set up a comparative advantage table here real quick. Do Papa, we're going to do and so we're going to be producing burgers, and we're going to be producing pizza. And now McDonald's can produce 20 burgers, or they could produce 200 pizzas. Okay? And then Papa can produce 100. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. It's going to be McDonald's can produce 200 burgers or 20 pizzas, and Papa can produce 200 burgers or 100 pizzas, right? Now, here's our example right here, right? And this would be a comparative advantage table. We'd set it up like this so that way it'd make it easier, and we can see what goes where. Now, let's first talk about absolute advantage. Now, absolute advantage just means that the producer can produce the most output, or requires the least amount of inputs, the resources, to produce that good, right? So here, let's look at who has the absolute advantage in burgers. So who can produce the most burgers? So here you're just looking for which number is the bigger number, right? Well, nobody has the absolute advantage in burgers, right? They both can produce 200. So neither of those, neither Papa nor McDonald's has the absolute advantage. Now, if we look over here at pizza, Papa can produce 100 pizzas, while McDonald's can only produce 20. So Papa has the absolute advantage in producing pizza. And I usually mark that somewhere to be able to tell me later, like, oh, if I'm looking roll back, if I go back, I can look and see, okay, that one's marked. That means that it's the absolute advantage. Now we're going to look at who has the comparative advantage, and that's the person that has the lower opportunity cost, all right? So let's go ahead and go through this. So there's an easy way to do this, knowing that this is an output question, and we'll get to what an output and an input question is here shortly. But output just means OOO, right? Other goes over, okay? And knowing that it's an output is that this is what they're producing, right? This is their final product, okay? So other goes over, so you're going to take the opportunity cost of producing the cost, right? You're giving up all of these pizzas over what you gain, which is these 200 burgers, right? So one burger costs you half a pizza, right? And then here, for burgers for McDonald's, again, okay, it's going to cost you, right? You're giving up all these pizzas to produce the 200 burgers, so it's going to cost you 20 pizzas to produce 200 burgers. So this is going to be one burger equals 1/10 of a pizza. Okay. Now, real simply, since we already have this like this, we could see that one burger costs half a pizza, one burger costs a tenth of a pizza. Now, this second value here, you're just going to take the reciprocal of that value, and that's going to be the other side, right? So over here, it's going to be, you could do it, or you could do it this, right? It's going to cost you 200 burgers to produce 100 pizzas, right? Or you could just take the reciprocal. So one pizza equals to, that's really tight there. One pizza equals 2 burgers, right? And that's just the reciprocal of that value there, right? You can see that there, okay? So one pizza here, again, you're going to gain 20, and it's cost over gain, right? So it's going to cost you 200 over 20. So one pizza equals 10 burgers, right? Okay. And then, so we got that there. And so now what we want to see is, from this, we're going to determine who's going to produce what. And from that, they're going to trade that particular good to the other country, right? That's why we're doing all of this, to see who has the advantage and who has the lower opportunity cost to produce that good. So who it costs less to produce, who of the two people, which one it costs less for, right? So here, burgers, if we're just looking at burgers, right? We're just going to look at burgers. It's one burger equals half of a pizza, or one burger equals a tenth of a pizza. Well, a tenth is smaller, so that means here that McDonald's is going to produce burgers, right? Well, up here at pizzas, we can look, and since 2 is obviously smaller than 10, right? Then Papa is going to produce a pizza. Now, you can never have the comparative advantage in both, right? So McDonald's here could not have the comparative advantage in burgers and pizza. They can only have it in burgers or pizza, right? And so what this means, right, or what this tells us, is that McDonald's should make burgers, Papa John's should make pizza, and Papa John's should trade pizza to McDonald's for their burgers, right? McDonald's should trade their burgers for Papa John's pizza, right? And showing that they have, it costs them less to produce that particular good, okay? All right, now, okay, so there, again, are two types of questions. There are output questions, and output questions, again, an easy way to remember that is other goes over, right? And that just means that you're producing that final good, right? That you're just dealing with final goods. Now, input questions are resources or variables like time or parts or amount of sunlight, right? That it takes to produce a good. That's an input question. An input question, you just answer a little bit differently. And that just means other goes under, right? So here we did other goes over. Instead, it would go other goes under, right? And that would give us the the correct answer there. Now, moving on to something called terms of trade. So here I'd said earlier that, Papa John's should trade pizza with McDonald's for burgers, right? And McDonald's should trade burgers for pizza. Now, we need to figure out what's best for both countries, right? They need to agree upon a condition that would benefit both countries. Now, let's go ahead and use a different example, right? Let's go ahead and use two countries, and they're going to produce pineapples and radios, right? And Kenya, India. Okay, so here we go. This tells us here that Kenya can produce 30 pineapples, right? And Kenya can produce 10 radios. And then down here, we can see India. India can produce 40 pineapples and 40 radios. Now, what we notice here is since they're able to produce 40 and 40, this would result in a straight line PPC. This right here would result in bowed out PPC, right? Since they're two different values, these are the same values, meaning if you give up one radio, you're going to gain one pineapple, and so on, right? So you have that constant cost, right? So let's go ahead and work this out. We want to find out first of all, this is an output question, right? Because we're seeing that they're able to produce 30. The final product is 30 pineapples. The final radio product is 10, right? And again, that's cost over gain, right? And so here it's going to be one pineapple, right? And so they're going to make one pineapple. They're going to give up all 10. To make the 30 pineapples, they're going to give up all 10 radios, right? So that's going to be 10 over 30, right? And that reduces down to 1/3. And then, again, the reciprocal is on this side. It's going to be the reciprocal. So this will be 1 radio equals 3 pineapples. Okay? And then down here, this one's pretty simple, right? Other goes over, 40 over 40. That is 1 to 1. And this is 1 to 1. All right, so now we want to find out the terms of trade. Now, it's real simple to figure out the terms of trade. You're just going to isolate one side. So if we're just looking at radios, right? You're just going to pick a value in between these two values right here, right? So any number between 1 and 3 will work for us, right? So 1 radio for any number of pineapples between 1 and 3. So 1 radio for 2 pineapples would work. Let's back up here a second. First of all, Kenya is going to produce pineapples because they have the absolute advantage. And then, of course, India has the absolute advantage in producing radios, right, since they have the smaller opportunity cost. And then, so Kenya is going to produce pineapples, India is going to produce radios, but how much should they make? Well, here again, with the terms of trade, is going to be 1 radio for 2 pineapples, right? And that works because you just any number between that. That's it's pretty that simple, right? Now, let's look at the other side. Now, I usually do is I'll flip it. That way it makes a little bit more sense to me. So here we have radios to pineapples, right? And we want to do trade. We want to do 1 radio for 2 pineapples, right? Well, if we flip the ratio, so pineapples to radios, right? Again, it's going to be 2 pineapples to 1 radio. And the reason why we do that is because this side's flipped, right? This number 1 right here represents pineapples, and this represents radios. So 2 pineapples is only going to give them 2/3 of a radio, right? So it's a better deal that they get 1 radio for those 2 pineapples, right? So that makes sense for both countries to be able to do that. And so that's going to be it for topic 1.3. Hope that helped you guys out. Again, the topics that we covered were absolute advantage, comparative advantage, and terms of trade. All right, thank you guys.